In the glittering constellation of musical talent that has graced Britain's stages, few stars shine with the raw brilliance and haunting vulnerability of Sydnie Christmas. At just 28, this Gravesend-born songstress has already etched her name into the firmament of British entertainment history, becoming not just a Britain's Got Talent champion, but the first female singer ever to claim that coveted crown. The golden-voiced performer who transformed Tomorrow from a saccharine show tune into a soul-stirring declaration of resilience stands today as living proof that sometimes the most powerful voices emerge from the quietest struggles. Before we begin, don't forget to hit like as a gesture of tribute to this extraordinary talent who reminded millions that sometimes our darkest moments precede our brightest dawns. But here's what few witnessed behind that radiant smile and that voice that seemed to reach beyond the rafters of the auditorium and into the very hearts of a nation. A decade of silent battles, of doors slammed in her face, of whispered doubts in the midnight hours, and the slow, crushing weight of a dream that seemed forever just beyond her grasp. At 28, Sydnie Christmas stands at a precipice familiar to many who've tasted sudden fame after years of obscurity. The spotlights are finally hers, the audience is rapt, the opportunities flowing like wine. But beneath the surface lies a deeper darkness, the shadow of a decade spent believing her voice might never truly be heard. Sources close to the singer report that despite her triumphant win, Sydnie still wakes some mornings gripped by the phantom anxiety of those years in the wilderness, wondering if this dream too might vanish like morning mist. What happens when everything you fought for finally arrives, but carries with it the ghosts of every rejection that came before? When the applause fades, can you truly silence the echoes of doubt that have been your constant companions for so long? The story begins in Gravesend, Kent, in those quiet streets where young Sydnie first discovered the power of her voice. By most accounts, it was a childhood marked by ordinary joys and ordinary struggles, a loving family who recognized her gift early, the cramped living room that became her first stage, the weathered piano where her fingers first found melody, her parents' modest home with its narrow hallway leading to a kitchen where music often spilled from the radio became the incubator for an extraordinary talent. In the local church choir, shy little Sydnie would reportedly stand slightly behind the other children, her voice soaring, but her confidence still finding its wings. Her childhood bedroom walls, plastered with posters of West End shows, became both sanctuary and aspiration. Friends from those early days recall a girl who would sing while doing the dishes, who hummed during maths lessons, who seemed most herself when lost in song. The first wounds came early, the school talent show, where reportedly, nervous and 11, she forgot the words mid-performance. The scattered laughter that followed carved something deep and lasting. Yet it was also here that young Sydnie first learned to transform pain into performance, returning the following year with a rendition of Tomorrow from Annie that silenced the same room that had once laughed. Those who knew her then speak of a child with tenacity beyond her years, practicing scales while other children played, saving pocket money for vocal lessons, recording herself on cassette tapes to analyze every note. Winter evenings found her at the Orpington Rugby Club, singing for spare change and experience, building the resilience that would later sustain her through far greater challenges. The bright-eyed teenager who graduated from D&B Academy of Performing Arts in 2014 stepped into the world of professional theater with boundless hope and energy. What awaited her, however, was the harsh reality faced by countless talented performers, a world where exceptional is merely the entry requirement, where thousands compete for dozens of roles. What followed was, according to those close to Sydnie, a blur of auditions and rejections. West End casting directors saw talent but chose experience. Theater companies praised her voice but went with established names. For every callback came 20 silent phones. For every near miss came weeks of questioning her path. Reportedly living in a tiny London flat shared with 3 other aspiring performers, Sydney worked as a waitress, then a shop assistant, then a cleaner. Anything to keep the dream alive for one more audition. The invisible years stretched on. While peers landed roles and built careers, Sydney found herself increasingly relegated to the margins of the industry she so desperately loved. By her mid-20s, the bright-eyed graduate had weathered countless "no thank yous" and "we've gone another direction" messages. She became, in her own words, invisible in a world obsessed with spotlights. Those years saw Sydney take work wherever it appeared, reportedly singing on cruise ships, in small regional productions, in German theaters, each role a stepping stone, but none the breakthrough she yearned for. The calendar pages turned, and with them grew the quiet, gnawing fear that perhaps her voice, for all its power, might never find its true audience. And that's when everything changed. By most accounts, it was an unremarkable January day in 2024 when Sydney, now working as a gym receptionist between auditions, made the decision that would alter the trajectory of her life. With the quiet determination of someone making a last stand, she submitted her application to Britain's Got Talent, not with stars in her eyes, but with the pragmatic resolve of a veteran soldier choosing her final battlefield. The stage of the BGT auditions loomed before her like both opportunity and judgment. Standing in the wings, reportedly trembling slightly, and clutching the microphone that felt both familiar and foreign in her hands, Sydney made a choice that would prove prophetic: to return to Tomorrow, the very song that had redeemed her as a child. What happened next has become the stuff of BGT legend. As the final notes of her performance hung in the air, the theater erupted in a standing ovation. Amanda Holden, moved to tears, reached for the golden buzzer. In that moment, after a decade of shadows, Sydnie Christmas stepped into the light. Those who witnessed her face in that golden shower of confetti speak of a woman not merely celebrating, but awakening, as though a part of her that had been carefully guarded and protected through years of disappointment was finally, tentatively, allowing itself to believe. The weeks that followed saw Sydnie Christmas transform from struggling performer to national sensation. Her semi-final performance of My Way captured the essence of her journey, the lyrics taking on profound significance through her extraordinary interpretation. With nearly 38% of the public vote, she secured her place in the final with the overwhelming support of a nation that had fallen under the spell of her voice and her story. The final night of Britain's Got Talent, 2024, saw Sydney deliver a rendition of Over the Rainbow that by all accounts left not a dry eye in the house. As Ant and Dec prepared to announce the winner, the cameras caught Sydney's expression, a mixture of hope and the hard-learned caution of someone who has been disappointed too many times before. When her name was called, the moment of realization unfolded like a flower blooming in time-lapse. The disbelief, the joy breaking through, the tears that spoke of every silent struggle that had led to this triumph. In that instant, Sydnie Christmas became not just a talent show winner, but a symbol of perseverance for dreamers everywhere. The aftermath was a whirlwind of appearances, interviews, and opportunities. A debut album titled My Way, a performance at the prestigious Royal Variety Show, an invitation to sing at the Hollywood Bowl alongside legendary composer David Foster. The girl who had once sung for pocket change at the Orpington Rugby Club was now being celebrated on international stages. Yet beneath the glittering surface of sudden success lay the accumulated weight of the years before. Sources close to Sydney report that the transition from obscurity to fame brought its own unique challenges. The psychological whiplash of moving from rejection to adulation, from invisibility to constant scrutiny, created a disorienting new reality to navigate. Behind the scenes, reportedly, were moments of quiet panic, of overwhelming imposter syndrome, of waking in the night certain that it would all be taken away. The very mind that had protected her through years of disappointment now struggled to accept that the dream had become reality. Friends speak of a Sydney who sometimes needed reassurance that the applause was real, who would read reviews with trembling hands, who would occasionally need to step away from social media when the attention became too intense. The trauma of rejection had left scars that success alone could not heal. There were physical costs, too. Years of working multiple jobs while pursuing auditions had taken their toll. The voice that now commanded stages had been maintained through years of strain and stress, through singing while exhausted, through performing while ill, because opportunities were too precious to miss. The relentless pace of post-win commitments reportedly left little time for recovery. While the public saw the radiant performer, those in Sydney's inner circle witnessed the exhaustion that followed each appearance, the careful voice preservation techniques, the quiet determination to meet every obligation despite the mounting fatigue. Perhaps most poignantly, sources describe moments when Sydney would receive news of new opportunities and immediately think of those friends who had struggled alongside her, many of whom were still waiting for their own breakthrough. The survivor's guilt of being the one who made it added yet another emotional complexity to navigate. Success, especially the kind that comes after prolonged struggle, is rarely the simple happy ending we might imagine. For Sydnie Christmas, the reality of life after BGT has reportedly been a nuanced tapestry of triumph and adjustment, of gratitude and grief. There's a particular kind of mourning that can accompany the achievement of a long-held dream, the mourning for the person you were in the struggle, for the identity built around perseverance and hope. When that struggle suddenly ends, it can leave a curious emptiness alongside the joy. By most accounts, Sydney has approached this new chapter with the same quiet determination that sustained her through the difficult years. Yet those close to her note moments of vulnerability, instances when the mask of the confident performer slips to reveal the still healing wounds beneath. The public Sydney smiles on red carpets, delivers flawless performances, expresses nothing but gratitude in interviews. The private Sydney, reportedly, sometimes retreats to make sense of the whirlwind, to process the complex emotions that come with having your life's narrative suddenly rewritten. There's a peculiar pressure that comes with being celebrated as an overnight success when you know the decade of darkness that preceded it. The temptation to present only the polished final product, to hide the messiness of the journey, creates a disconnect between public perception and lived experience. Now, if you're wondering about the fixed claims that briefly surrounded Sydney's win, it's worth noting that these stemmed from misconceptions about her professional background. While she had indeed performed in various productions prior to BGT, including on cruise ships and in the off-West End show Lazarus, sources close to Sydney maintain that these were stepping stones, not stable career achievements. The reality, reportedly, was far from the established professional some critics imagined. These were hard-won opportunities punctuated by long periods of unemployment, side jobs, and financial precarity. The singing jobs that appeared impressive on paper were, in practice, part of the struggle rather than evidence of prior success. Those who worked with Sydney in those pre-BGT years describe a talented performer still very much paying her dues, still learning her craft, still far from the breakthrough she sought. The narrative of a seasoned professional gaming, the system fell apart under scrutiny of the actual timeline of her career. What's documented is that despite these prior opportunities, Sydney was working as a gym receptionist when she auditioned for BGT, hardly the position of someone who had already made it in the industry. Throughout both the wilderness years and the whirlwind of success, Sydney's anchor has reportedly been her close-knit circle of supporters, friends from her training days, family who never wavered in their belief, fellow performers who understood both the dream and the struggle. These relationships have provided continuity in a life transformed by sudden fame. According to those close to her, Sydney's parents' home in Kent remains her sanctuary, the place where she can set aside the persona of BGT winner and simply be herself. The garden bar her father built has apparently become her thinking spot, where, with a glass of wine and familiar surroundings, she processes the extraordinary turn her life has taken. Her friends speak of her loyalty, of how success hasn't changed her fundamental warmth and authenticity. Despite now moving in celebrity circles, Sydney reportedly maintains the same friendships that sustained her through the difficult years, values the same simple pleasures, holds fast to the same core values. This grounding force of genuine connection has, by all accounts, been crucial in helping Sydney navigate the transition from anonymity to recognition. In a world where everything else has changed, these relationships provide the thread of continuity that helps her maintain her sense of self. Today, Sydnie Christmas stands at a crossroads, familiar to many who achieve sudden fame after prolonged struggle. The initial euphoria of recognition has given way to the more complex reality of building a sustainable career, of proving that her BGT victory was not the destination, but merely the beginning. In the harsh light of the entertainment industry, talent show winners face unique scrutiny. The narrative of overnight success, however misleading given Sydney's decade of prior work, creates expectations of continued meteoric rises. Industry veterans speak of the particular pressure facing BGT champions, who must translate public voting support into lasting commercial viability, who must prove themselves not just to audiences but to industry gatekeepers still skeptical of talent show origins. Industry sources report that Sydney has been working tirelessly since her win, determined to translate this opportunity into lasting success. The debut album, the Royal Variety performance, the high-profile collaborations, all represent not just achievement, but stepping stones toward the career longevity she has always sought. Recording studio personnel describe a perfectionist at work, someone who reportedly requests multiple takes even when producers are satisfied, who studies each playback with intense focus, who brings to each session a meticulous preparation that speaks to her understanding that this first album may define her commercial identity for years to come. The stakes, for an artist who waited so long for this chance, could not be higher. Yet the shadow of those difficult years reportedly still lingers. Friends describe occasional moments of doubt, of wondering if this new reality is temporary, of the instinctive bracing for disappointment that became habitual during the years of rejection. The psychological armor built over a decade does not dissolve overnight, even in the warmth of success. Those in her inner circle speak of the complexity of navigating an industry that had previously overlooked her talent. The same casting directors who had shown her to the door now sent effusive invitations. The same producers who had never returned her calls now sought collaboration. Navigating these relationships with grace rather than resentment reportedly requires constant emotional discipline. The physical demands of her new schedule present their own challenges. Voice coaches speak of the difficult balance between seizing opportunities and preserving the instrument. The touring schedule, the promotional appearances, the constant demand for the voice that is now her livelihood, all must be managed with care to prevent the kind of burnout or vocal damage that has derailed countless promising careers. There are moments, according to those close to her, when the pressure threatens to overwhelm, when the fear of squandering this hard-won opportunity creates a perfectionism that borders on self-sabotage. The terror of disappointing after coming so far can reportedly create a paralysis that requires gentle intervention from her support system. The weight of carrying not just her own dreams, but the projected hopes of countless viewers who saw in her story a reflection of their own struggles adds another layer of complexity. There are the constant social media comparisons to other performers, the scrutiny of every vocal choice, the amateur critics ready to declare that the magic of those BGT performances hasn't translated to subsequent appearances. The attention that was once so desperately sought now requires careful management to preserve creative autonomy and mental health. There are practical challenges, too. The business aspects of a music career for which no amount of vocal training could prepare her. The contracts, the royalty structures, the strategic decisions about artistic direction versus commercial appeal. Sources close to Sydnie report her determination to understand these aspects rather than delegate them entirely, to take ownership of her career in ways that ensure she never again feels powerless in her artistic journey. Perhaps the most profound challenge, according to those who know her well, is reconciling the before and after, integrating the Sydnie who struggled for so long with the Sydnie who now stands in the spotlight. Finding a way to honor both journeys, to carry forward the lessons of the wilderness years into this new landscape of opportunity. The question that reportedly haunts quiet moments is one familiar to many who achieve long-sought dreams. Now that you've arrived, who are you beyond the wanting? When a desire has shaped identity for so long, its fulfillment necessitates a kind of rebirth, a redefinition of self beyond the yearning that once defined it. Will this extraordinary talent who persevered through a decade of setbacks now find the balance that allows her to thrive in success? Can the very resilience that sustained her through rejection now help her navigate the unique pressures of fulfilling her long-held dream? Can she transform the scars of struggle into a wisdom that guides her through the equally treacherous terrain of achievement? In the story of Sydnie Christmas, we find something universal and profoundly moving, the testament of a spirit that refused to be silenced, of a voice that waited patiently to be heard, of a dream deferred but never abandoned. Her journey reminds us that sometimes our darkest moments lie just before dawn breaks, that perseverance is not merely about enduring, but about maintaining belief when evidence suggests otherwise. From the little girl singing in an Orpington rugby club to the woman who brought the Britain's Got Talent audience to their feet, Sydnie Christmas embodies the quiet heroism of those who continue to show up day after day in pursuit of their passion. Her story isn't just about talent, it's about the tenacity required to ensure that talent finds its audience. As she steps forward into this new chapter, carrying both the scars of struggle and the light of achievement, we bear witness to a journey still unfolding, to a voice still finding new depths and heights. The true legacy of Sydnie Christmas may not be in that golden moment of victory, but in how she transforms it into a platform for the music she was always meant to share. If her journey has moved you, if you've ever held on to a dream despite evidence suggesting it might never come true, leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Sometimes in honoring another's perseverance, we find the strength to continue our own.